So Brexit happens. Let's say, for example, hard Brexit, 31st of October, Britain's out of the European Union. The ports clog up, medicine runs out, people are stockpiling food like it's South Africa in 1994 all over again. Crazy things happen in the world. What happens to South African companies domiciled here that have done very well, thank you very much, out of having exposure to the UK? We'll forget about the ones that have blown it really, really badly, the old mutuals of the world, and that deserves some discussion separately, the famous brands of the world. But there have been lots of South African companies that have gone into the UK markets anticipating that getting pound earnings was going to be the gold at the end of the rainbow. And it hasn't often turned out that way, right?
Bruce, it's unfortunately the day that people go overseas, or the day that companies face pressure to go overseas, is the day when the rand's collapsing, when the South African economy is doing so poorly. They are under pressure from their shareholders. They're under pressure from the investment community. You've got to get non-rand earnings. That they go overseas when the rand's at its weakest, and the overseas people see you coming from a mile off. So you normally buy an asset that's too expensive, and somehow South African companies, with one notable exception, like the idea of buying a fixer-upper. Let's go in, we can fix this company. I know it's in problems, I know it's got issues, but we're good. I mean, look at us in South Africa, we're fantastic. You go there, we are going to fix this thing. It turns out to be a catastrophe. Normally the macros go against you. The rand is stable or strong over the next 10 years. You can't fix this company. There's a competitive environment there you know nothing about, and they eat you for breakfast.
The one notable exception, I'm assuming, is SAB Miller.
Yeah, well, then there's two, sorry. Okay. SAB Miller, a little bit in the back of my mind there, but the other one is a bit corporate fest.
And again, SAB Miller...
They bought successful companies.
But SAB Miller did buy broken businesses. I mean, they bought businesses through Eastern Europe that were in trouble. They were worn out, and they refreshed bottles and labels and distribution and got people drinking beer again, and that worked really well. They bought Peroni, which was expensive, and they gave them a foothold in Europe. And then Miller, which caused a bit of a drag.
Work all that well, yeah.
But they became the biggest brewer in the world for a bit.
When Bidcorp went in there, they only bought successful businesses. They didn't buy any fixer-up businesses. And I suppose at the end of the day, you've got to diversify your earnings, but there's a few rules. Do it slowly. Don't bet the farm. That seems to be the tendency, is you go big and you bet the farm. And there's many examples of that. Do it progressively. Learn the environment first.
Why, Wayne? Why? It's no fun there. I mean, you can't lose billions of rands with the shareholders' money if you're careful.
South Africa is very isolated, and it's a relatively small community, and everyone knows everyone. And it's actually, I mean, surprisingly enough, relatively easy doing business here compared to the intense competition you face in America or Europe or the UK or Australia. It's very different competitive environment.
The other successful company which has gone out there is Discovery, which has made quite good money out of the Vitality Life and Vitality Medical Aid
3% of Discovery's earnings, though. 3% are foreign earnings. They're doing it nicely. They lost R1 billion in the United States. They cut their losses on Destiny Health there early on. They made a good call there because their competitors saw them coming, and they were advertising themselves on TV and everything else, and their competitors then closed ranks on them. But they left Vitality in the United States and have got it in 30 different insurers around the world, plus their own stakes in Prudential in the UK, Pru Health, and
to Vitality
Health, and Ping An in China, 25% of the biggest insurance company in the world's health insurance business. Some interesting sort of Trojan horses there, potentially.
Yeah, we've talked about them over the months. They're not doing particularly well right now, and there are concerns about the slow rollout of the local bank. But I think the internationalization strategy can work. I think, as Wayne says, it's better to buy businesses that are doing well than ones which are not doing well. In the retail, food and consumer space, it's been messy. I mean, you mentioned famous brands before with that gourmet burger kitchen debacle. Some of the retailers like Truworths and Fushini have gone there. You know, the internationalization of Woolies, they went to Australia. I don't know what to say. I mean, as you say, South Africa is a little bit too small for the very ambitious corporate. The problem is when you venture far afield, it can be tough out
I
there.
mean, Christopher didn't only get burnt on Steinhoff and lose a vast proportion of his considerable wealth in Steinhoff with the listing in Frankfurt of Steinhoff, and then the calamity that came with the big fraud that was exposed. But then he's got Brait as well, and Brait made a big acquisition in a business called New Look in the UK. And New Look, which was at one point valued at 37 billion rand, they wrote it down to absolutely nothing. And now Christopher is looking at this lot and going, okay, we really need to fix this up. And this almost feels like his last hurrah. He needs to leave the market with a success story. He's not getting any...
Yeah, there's some persistent rumours there. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, whether John Nodder and his colleagues will survive in terms of the management team there, because I think there was also that unfortunate situation where the management team used company funds to gear themselves to take larger stakes. And then when that thing blew up, they said, okay, we'll redo the scheme at a lower and more favourable level in order to align
the company
management
funded it
interests.
out, yeah.
And, at some point, people start saying, well,
You can't, hold on a second.
about?
You are incentivizing yourself, so you're taking a strong position because you want to have a big stake, because if this works, you get super rich. If it doesn't work, there's no downside for you because the company bails you out. I mean, that is unpalatable at best.
Well, that's not capitalism, yeah.
Smart. But I mean, that's when capitalism goes bad.
If you look at Brait and New Look, I mean, once again, they bought a company. It was a little bit dull. It sold to slightly overweight 40-year-old British woman. It wasn't fancy. Then they decided, no, we're going to shake this thing up. We're going to make it edgy. We're going to go to a lower age group market, more trendy. We're going to go for men. We're going to have men's fashion. So they totally and completely made a mess of the whole thing. Their traditional ladies who went shopping there didn't like the fashion, didn't like the look, didn't like the loud music in the store, didn't like all the flashing lights.
I understand them.
Very difficult.
I understand them.
Very,
I feel
very
them.
difficult,
I feel their
difficult
pain.
competitor environment. Then you look at the businesses that are left. I mean, the food business in SA, it's a good business, but it's a little bit boring. The gym business is a fairly good business, but it's a bit boring.
But they're busy cutting back dramatically. They're busy laying off people in South Africa. Certainly the CEO of Virgin Active in South Africa is gone.
But you could also look, Brait's got serious debt.
Yeah.
If they bought a lot of those businesses, there's big debt there. That's why they've got to look at the rights
That's
issue.
the Christopher strategy, isn't it? You borrow lots of money.
And you go for it.
And you go for it.
Yeah.
And as long as the economy goes with you, you're absolutely fine. But if it goes against you, you bomb. And they're bombed.
Christopher used to be someone that investors said, let's follow him into everything and anything he touches, because the man cannot do wrong. But, he's had a tough decade. And my sources indicate he's not quite as sharp as he used to be, and one must worry. So I would say there's a bit of emergency panel beating going on there in the Christopher portfolio. And I know that RMB has significant exposure there. So let's see how it all pans out.
Hopefully pan is not the operative word. The Peter Moyo, Trevor Manuel Old Mutual fight. We had Trevor Manuel on the show last week. I've subsequently spoken also to Peter Moyo quite extensively. Both individuals struggle to stick to the point and keep focus on singular issues. Both absolutely clear that they are right. In the corporate fight of the century, never before have we seen a company chief executive refusing to leave the building. There's a movie. He's just not that into you. They're just not into you, Peter. And the relationship is broken. The relationship cannot be fixed. This doesn't end well for anybody, potentially. We'll pick up on that story. Plus, why Naspers and Prosus, after the big humdinger listing in Amsterdam, has lost its sparkle. That coming up in a bit.